GM, welcome to another episode of Web3 Academy. This is the weekly doer spotlight. This is a place where entrepreneurs, creators, and business professionals can learn how to use Web3 to build thriving communities and sustainable business models. I'm Jay Bird, and as always, I'm here with my co-host, Kyle Reedhead. What's up, Kai?
What's going on, friends? Today we had, I'm surprised it took us this long to do this, but we had a conversation finally about music NFTs, and they are popping off right now. They are having a moment. And we had Austin Hurwitz come on because he's been just talking a bunch of great stuff about music NFTs on his podcast, on his newsletter, on Twitter. And we're so excited to have him on. And honestly, I feel like coming out of this episode, I learned so much, not even about Web3. I mean, I did learn a lot about Web3, but just about the music industry in general. We went through what was going on previous to streaming and how artists were getting screwed there, then how streaming started to impact the business model of a musician, and then what's currently going on in the Web3 space with music NFTs. And we sort of just speculated on how we think that this new technology is going to change the way that musicians get funding, musicians have experiences with their audience, how they're going to get distribution, and how we're going to discover music, and just so much stuff. It was so insightful. I really, really enjoyed this one.
Yeah, Austin just brings such a great perspective, having spent over a decade in the music industry. He worked at Amazon Music. He's been part of Venice Music, which is an independent music label that was created by Troy Carter, who is one of the leaders really in the music space. He's the one who built up John Legend and Lady Gaga. So Austin's just got that in-depth knowledge, and he's kind of right on the precipice of, he joined the music industry before Web3, sort of right at the beginning of the streaming age. So he's able to tell us, like, pre-streaming, what was it like? Okay, did streaming solve the problem of actually putting more money into artists' pockets? I love his views on streaming about how it actually didn't solve that problem, but it also created this all-you-can-eat buffet for us listeners, where we don't necessarily have the same attachment to our music as we used to. We just get anything we want at all times. And is that a good thing, or is it a bad thing? We had a little bit of a debate about that. His experience is just so vast, and his knowledge is so incredible. And I love also at the end of the episode how we really started to zoom out and look more long-term and talk about what's the playbook for artists here, and how do artists really benefit from both Web3 and streaming. It's not that Web3 is going to replace streaming. Streaming is still going to be a thing. We're still probably going to have $10 a month as a listener. But then what are the opportunities for artists to use Web3 and use NFTs? Yeah, super cool. We dropped a little bit of alpha about some upcoming projects he's excited about as well. This is just a rocket jam-packed episode. Loved it.
Rocket. I love that. Well, before we get into the episode, let's take a quick second to hear from our sponsors. Don't trust, verify. That's the unlock of blockchain technology. The ability to store information in an open, transparent, and permissionless manner. That information may be in the form of money, value, access, data, content, and so much more. Regardless, this innovation is going to change the way that we use the internet and the way business and economies function forever. How valuable would it be to you if you were ahead of one of the most influential technological innovations of our lifetime? Staying on the forefront of Web3 will teach you where and what to build if you're an entrepreneur, where to focus your time and energy as a creator or business professional trying to stay ahead of the curve, or where to put your money if you're an investor. That's exactly what Web3 Academy Pro is doing for people just like you. I'm putting all my time and energy into these weekly reports combining on-chain analysis and industry insights to uncover what business models and technologies will win or are winning in Web3. Rather than discuss and speculate on what's happening in the space, myself and the Pro team are verifying through analyzing what's happening on-chain, giving you the realest analysis in Web3. We're sending Pro members weekly on-chain reports directly to your inbox. We've opened a private Discord channel exclusively for Pro members to ask questions. And finally, we're also running monthly live Q&As exclusively for Pro members. Signing up is simple. Head to w3academy.io/pro today, log in with your email you use to subscribe to Web3 Academy, and sign up today. If you're ready to level up in Web3, then it's time to go pro, the #1 resource to learn how to build and invest in Web3. For all you Pro members out there listening, thanks for your support, and I look forward to continuing to go deeper down this rabbit hole and learning with all of you. And remember, when in doubt, look on chain.
Unlock Protocol is the NFT membership protocol for Web3. Content subscriptions, community access, event tickets are all forms of memberships, one of the most common business models for creators and entrepreneurs today. Building an NFT membership opens many new possibilities for your members. Everything from tailored multi-platform experiences to the ability to sell an unfinished subscription on secondary markets. These are things just not possible in Web 2. However, in order for this business model to work, creators need NFTs which are time-bound or have built-in recurring payments. Unlock Protocol does this for your NFTs. Better yet, with a few simple steps, you can create your own NFT contract without code. What WordPress has done for websites, Unlock Protocol is doing for membership NFTs. If you're an NFT creator, you can't rely on royalties as they are likely going to zero. You need recurring revenue. You need Unlock. At Web3 Academy, we believe NFT memberships are the future of business and community. And that's why we decided to build on Unlock. Learn more at unlock-protocol.com. Austin, so stoked to have you on the show. How you doing, my man? Great to have you here.
I'm doing well. It's an honor and privilege to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks. That's so nice. I love it when people say that. That's so nice. It's an honor and privilege to have you. The honor is all ours. Okay, well, let's start. We're going to dive deep into music and Web3 and the intersection and where this is going. But I think at the beginning, everyone needs context. And music industry is a bit of a black box to most people because it's sort of controlled by three major companies. And unless you work in music, I'm a big fan of music, but I don't think most of us understand the business model currently, what it's like for a typical musician. So can you just sort of give us that context of before Web3, what is the business model today for most musicians?
Yeah, let's take it back and in terms of the lens of an artist. So if you're an artist before the advent of streaming, so you needed the ability to get into like physical stores. You needed vinyl pressings, record tapes. The only way that you would get access to that distribution and that of radio is through working with a middleman. That middleman would be a record label. And so you needed to go to these people in order to get access to that distribution. It's opened up significantly as streaming has evolved. And so instead of having to go directly to a record label, you can go to is now deemed a distributor, and you're able to use what's called like TuneCore or CD Baby. And it's really just a SaaS product, distribution software to get your music out into the world. Traditionally, the record label for taking on all the risk of bringing you onto their label, promoting you, marketing you, putting you on radio, all of that was a pretty significant upfront cost. And so what they would do is own your music. What is called owning, you've probably heard of the term owning your masters. What a master is a master recording of the actual work. So the song is split up into a master recording and then the publishing, which we'll leave to the side for now. But on that, essentially that means that the label gets to decide what to do, when to do with your music. So when to release it, how to release it, they have all of the say. And in return, you're getting access to distribution and a small royalty percentage. Traditional music deals on the major side are usually like an 80-20 split. The 80-20 is in favor of the label. And then keep in mind that anything that they paid out to promote you, to market you, anything related to the record releasing, all of that needs to get paid back to them first before you get a royalty. So that's what's called recoupment. So take an example. If they spent $200,000 on promoting your release, instead of it being like a joint venture where, okay, like they put in some, I put in some, and it would get a rev share, you don't see a dollar until that $200,000 has been recouped to the label. And then you get your measly 20%. So that's kind of been the state of play on the major label side. Even into the streaming era, it's getting a little bit more fair in terms of deal terms, but that's kind of where we stand. And so as an independent artist, it's really challenging to make a living. If you don't want to go that route and you're looking for more fair terms, you're taking on a lot of that responsibility. You're taking on a lot of that upfront cost. It's been a challenge really to build out a career. And we can dive more into what streaming looks like. It's really hard to make a living just on streaming alone.
This sounds crazy to me. As an entrepreneur, I'm like, why the heck would I ever give away 80% of my revenue? What allowed the record labels to create these deals and to have the power and leverage?
Yeah, because they have access to information and people. If you compared it to your point of a startup, right? A startup goes and raises capital. What they'll typically do is they'll take a bunch of capital in for a percent of their company. It's usually a minority stake in the company. And then they determine how they're going to pay out later, whether that's an exit or they're distributing income or whatever. That's what we define in the 21st century as fair. Nothing about the music industry has historically been fair. It's very much been one-sided by a bunch of labels that had all the power. Because look, at the end of the day, particularly before the advent of streaming, it's like, okay, if you don't want to play ball, good luck. Like, how are you getting your music onto radio? How are you getting your music into record stores? You're not. The only game in town was the label. And so there was no need to negotiate. They had all the leverage. That's starting to change, but we're still trying to fight decades and decades and decades of a predatory relationship between record labels and artists. And I'm not saying all record labels are bad by any means, but that is definitely the state of play.
Does this remain such an issue even when an artist becomes very big? We were talking about before this, Jay, you were saying Taylor Swift is making this public and fighting about this. Are they still taking 80% of these big artists, or do the artists get some leverage at some point?
Yeah, they definitely get some leverage at some point and they're able to renegotiate and make more fair terms. Okay. But even to the point of Taylor Swift, for the audience who may not be familiar, because she did not own her music, and that is still standard fare on the major label landscape. When her catalog was sold to Scooter Braun, she had no recourse. Now this man is going to take the lion's share of royalties on my back catalog, and there's nothing that I can do about it. So even if she were to negotiate, now that she's big and she wants to negotiate her next contract, that does nothing to the master agreements that she's already signed away for her back catalog.
Interesting.
And so when you sign these deals, is it typical to sign? Is it like one album at a time?
I wish.
Are you signing for like forever? Like,
yeah.
All
That's
my music.
Really, really good point. So it's really unfortunate because a lot of artists will see a record deal put in front of them and it's, $1 million advance. It's the most money that they've ever seen in their life. And then they see that, oh, they're signing like 5 albums. And what it really is, one album with an option to renew each album subsequently. The option is held by the record label. So they can decide if they think that the album is going to be commercially viable or not, and then put it out. That can put an artist in a complete holding pattern for their entire career, because you could put out one album, the entire record label is behind you. You go to do the follow-up or the third album or the fourth album, and you're not hot or you're not a priority for them anymore. They've moved in a different direction and they just shelve you, and you're in contract. There's nothing that you could do. So you could literally be stuck on a record label that doesn't want to support you anymore because you've signed this multi-album deal. And then on the advance side, that also has to be recouped. That's not money that they're giving you. It's a loan. And so before you make you can see the multiple layers. Before you get paid anything after that, they have to make their money back of that advance, plus everything else that they put into it. Yeah. And then you can get your minority stake.
Damn. Part of me is like, God, these guys are geniuses for creating this business model. But that's also the complete profit-driven asshole part of me. The good human in me is, this is bad. Okay, so then enter streaming, right? Which was, in my view, in the public's view, I was like, great, here comes streaming. It's going to solve all these problems. Take us through what happened with streaming. Did it solve these problems? Did it not?
Yeah, so I think streaming did a lot of good. It's not a panacea. It's not solving all the problems, but what it did do was dramatically increase access to distribution, which is what we talked about earlier. So you don't need a record label to get your music up onto Spotify, and you can use these distributors that are just software. You pay like a distro kit a certain amount a year, and you're able to distribute as much music as you want. And that's great. At least you're getting your music out there. Now, there's a few problems with that. One, it's become noisier than ever. I think it was Apple just announced that they have 100 million songs on Apple Music. When I worked at Amazon, we were at 40 million, and that was 6 years ago. So it's like growing drastically, and it becomes really, really hard to stand out. It's an impossible game, really, to try to win in streaming. And two is the payouts are just not enough to make a living wage. So with streaming, what we got as consumers was honestly, the best music product of all time, right? We have
100%.
an all you can eat buffet of music at our fingertips. It's perfect. For the artist, it's one of the worst things of all time because you've completely put a cap on the value of their music. It's $9.99. They're getting a pro rata share of that, which the payouts, you'll hear a lot of numbers thrown out. The effective per play rate, which is not what they're actually paid, but if you were to take all the royalties that they got divided by their plays with their effective per play rate, is fractions of a penny. It's like 0.004 per play. So it's very, very small. You have to make tens of millions of plays, if not hundreds of millions, to see any sort of sizable income from streaming. And so it more or less has completely commoditized the distribution of music, and it's forced artists to look for additional revenue streams outside of their music.
That's what I was going to ask. Is this the models changing? Is that all it is? Like now it's not about earning revenue necessarily from the music per se, but it's about, I don't know, events and other things that they do, and just the way that you can build a business or generate revenue streams just from being a person that a lot of people know about and listen to and hear, right? Is there at least a lot of opportunity there, or what are you seeing now?
Yeah, a lot of opportunity is subjective, right? But if you think of where the lion's share of revenue is coming from an artist, it's not on the recorded music side. It's not on the actual distribution of music. It's on the merchandise and touring and brand partnerships. So yeah, as an artist, your goal often in this traditional streaming landscape is get as many eyeballs on me. It's essentially your top of funnel. So between streaming and TikTok and Reels and everything, get that top of funnel as big as possible so that you can convert people downstream to things that they're willing to pay for. So that would be merch and touring and everything. But not every artist can tour, and touring has gotten even more expensive post-pandemic, where I don't think a lot of people realize, particularly as an independent artist, how expensive it actually is to go on tour. Like all the equipment, all the individual people that you need to hire, the minimums that you're expected to hit at each venue, particularly when you're starting out and you're just trying to find enough people in each city. It's not really a viable option for a lot of artists.
You mentioned independent artists. What percentage of artists as a whole are independent versus are owned by the major labels?
It's interesting. In terms of the revenue, the majors own roughly like 80%. It might be a little less now of recorded music revenue. So I mean, they're behemoth. It's going down every year. On the number of individuals, I believe it was Spotify quoted there were like 6 million artists on their service, and a lion's share of that are independent artists. So it's inverted. All of the money is going to the majors with significantly less artists, and it's rapidly growing the independent space.
I just gotta ask, the other problem here that I keep hearing about before we get into Web3 and solutions here of how we can solve this is everyone always says that Spotify is not profitable. That is also true. Can you just touch on that?
Labels got a really good deal here.
Of course.
When people say that Spotify and Amazon and all of them, Apple, don't pay out, it's actually not true. They pay out a majority of the revenue that they get in. They've subsequently, since launching, negotiated down, but they're still well over 50% of the revenue that they're getting in, they're sending out. It's probably closer to like 65, 70% right now when you add in publishing as well. The challenge for all of them is their operating expenditures, their marketing budgets. They put in a lot to operate these businesses. Spotify operates out of One World Trade. They have like multiple floors of a ton of employees. Yeah, it's not a profit-driven business yet. I think they'll get to profitability, but it is a slow grind there. Now, you look at their competitors, Google, Apple, Amazon, they don't need it to be a profit center. They can use it to push other things, whether it's Amazon and Prime, it's Apple and like their entire services plan. So not just getting Apple Music, but getting Apple One and TV and everything that they can combine together. They're all focused on the lifetime value of the customer throughout the entire ecosystem in a way that, quite frankly, like Spotify can't do yet.
Just to clarify that, so Spotify and them, they're still paying out the money, but most of it is going to the labels. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, exactly. So if you go back to the beginning of the conversation, right, the majors take 80% on top of having to recoup everything. And so call it they're getting 60%, then they're taking whatever they're taking in. If there's anything recoupment, it goes there first. Whatever's left, they're taking 80% of that, then 20%. So it's not an effective 20% is going to the artist. It's much lower. There's a stat I saw a Blau post a couple years ago, I believe, that it's something like artists get 12 cents on every dollar that's earned in recorded music. So it's really, really small. It's a really bad disparity.
Jesus. I wonder if, I don't know these stats off the top of my head, but I wonder what would be the comparison to an athlete, or I'm trying to think of a similar comparison of somebody who has a solo skill that they're able to monetize. 12 cents on the dollar has got to be the lowest one out there. Athletes would be way
I can't imagine. Yeah, because you compare like an athlete, right? They're paying their agent and maybe like a manager or something like that, but they should be taking over a lion share. Or compared to content creators, right? Like YouTube pays out, I believe it's like 60-40, and that changes depending on what the platform is. But yeah, by and large in the creative space, I don't know of a field of creatives that have gotten the worst end of the stick than them.
And meanwhile, music is probably the one that we all connect with the most and love the most. It's the art that we all use every day. I think everybody in the world, no matter where you are, probably connects with music every day.
I mean, if you write a newsletter, you just pay 10% to Substack. The rest is all you, right? That's how easy it is as a content creator versus a musician. It's terrible.
It's a broken model in a lot of respects. And so I think that is the promise of a lot of the things that are developing today in finding new ways of valuing art and finding new ways of valuing music, because the current system is not set up for a majority of artists to succeed and be able to make a living off of their art.
Completely agree. Okay. As a fellow podcaster, you're just queuing up my questions so easily.
I'm doing my best.
It's wonderful. Before we talk about the what,
sure,
let's talk about the why. Why do you see Web3 as a way to solve these problems for musicians?
Or do you?
Yeah.
You never
do you?
I guess
good
do
point.
you?
Good point.
It is and it isn't. It's not a cure-all. It's not a silver bullet, but it does have a lot of properties that give artists more creative control and more independence in their careers. And so it's something that I instantly gravitated towards. I can kind of give a little bit of background into how I found my way into Web3 music, and that'll hopefully give some definition as to why I think it matters. So it was about a year ago during COVID. This was like the height of NFT media with like Top Shot and everything going on. I remember Pigeons and Planes, which is like one of the big like Blog Boy era publications. I used to come home from high school and go and read that, and like Two Dope Boys and Complex and everything. They had put together a cover story on this rapper, Spotty Wi-Fi, who had created an entire brand around his CryptoPunk. And I remember thinking, that's interesting. That's something I haven't seen before. And I sent it to the co-founders of Venice Music, Troy Carter and Susie Rue. Sent it over. This is at the same time that like Blau and Verite and RAC are all starting to get into music NFTs and selling for like really astronomical numbers, like numbers that don't make sense if you're just like looking at traditional streaming or like how a CD was valued or just distribution formats throughout time. You have people like selling for tens of thousands of dollars for a digital asset. What is going on here? And so I sent all of that over to them and said, hey, I'm not quite sure what's going on. I think we have a role to play and we should spend time in this space. And so I was leading product at Venice Music at the time. I moved over into this amorphous like SVP role, which ended up being building out our Web3 and community team. But I spent the next 6 months just jumping in every single Twitter space, talking to every single artist who was in the space, all the platforms while they were getting ready to launch, like Catalog and Sound XYZ, and learning what was the value proposition, right? And from an artist perspective, the value prop is pretty simple, quite frankly. It's like, okay, we are uncapping what the value is of our music. We are no longer having to be defined by the distribution format, because that's traditionally what's always happened, right? If the distribution of a vinyl or a CD or anything in the past, it's always been like, okay, you can sell it for this much. Like streaming, $9.99. Like that's where we're all at. And with music NFTs, that didn't exist. It was, okay, I am giving a digital fingerprint that is persistent forever on chain that you have ownership of. You have ownership of this collectible, and I set whatever value I want for it, just like, quite frankly, all the other arts do. If you look at what artists like painters and digital artists have been doing forever, it's defining the value of their work. Musicians have never had that opportunity. And so that's pretty clear. And you would see the big highlights of someone selling a music NFT on Sound and making more in 10 seconds than they would make in years of music royalties. And those are like big flashy headlines. I have some thoughts as to whether that's actually healthy or not, because it's not a fully sustainable business model by itself. I see it as auxiliary to building out an entire music strategy as an artist, but it can very much drive a lot of value for artists. From the fan side, I think this is where a lot of people get tripped up, because a fan would say, why am I going to buy an NFT for an exponential multiple when I can just listen to all the music in my pocket and it's a better listening experience? It's lean back. I don't have to do anything. Why would I buy a music NFT? Several reasons why I think more and more fans will get on board with music NFTs. And I don't know that it ever has a full mainstream moment. I think the devil is in the details in terms of what we define as mainstream, but I continue to see it grow and grow like every day. One is, this is something that Cooper Turley has talked about, so I want to give him credit. This idea of collecting rookie cards. If you think of it just as like digital collectibles, as like trading cards that you would have for like baseball or basketball or whatever, you buy a Tom Brady rookie card, whether you got it the day it came out or you bought it way after the fact for a higher multiple. I think it's an analog people start to understand. It's like, oh, of course, as Tom Brady becomes more prevalent and goes to the Hall of Fame and all these things will drive value to his collectibles because people define it as valuable. Same thing with music NFTs. If you take an early bet on an artist and they grow, you actually, for the first time in history, really, as a fan, are actually able to get some of that value accrual. So, perfect example, Daniel Allen is one of the biggest artists in Web3 music today. I would say he's got as good a shot as anyone as having like a mainstream crossover success. His first Genesis NFTs on Catalog and Sound XYZ about a year ago sold for anywhere between like 0.05, 0.1, maybe 0.15 at the top. You can't get one underneath 1 ETH right now. Like, I go ahead and look, you can't find it. And that is all due to the fact of him building in this space. And if you were an early supporter of him, like, you've also gotten to see that benefit. So that's one. And I'll pause there. Any questions on that? Because I can definitely go into others as well.
I do have a question. I also wonder, so when in 2021, we saw tons of NFT projects, and even not even to do with music, but people were just speculating on them. And they were like, oh, we're going to buy these because I know that this is the future for art, for communities, for whatever. And obviously what happened with Blau and some of them who were launching, they were, I think, overvalued. And that was just part of the hype, I think, of NFTs in 2021. You could sold anything as an NFT in 2021. It was going to work. So I wonder here with the prices that, and they're not massive right now, I guess, at 0.1, but do we think that this is still people in the space who just naturally speculate, and that's part of that price being driven up as much as it is now? Do you think that levels out and goes down and becomes less, or what are your thoughts on that?
It depends on the use case of the NFT. I think when it comes to a marketplace like Sound XYZ, it is in part driven by speculation. I think that's healthy in any sort of collection. You can't have a uniform collector base in anything. You have people that collect because they want to be patrons. You have people that collect because they want to speculate. You have people that collect because they see it as a store of value, or it gives them certain access to the artist that they wouldn't otherwise have. And you have people where that's all of the answers. Like they want to do all of that. What has been interesting is the volume is actually growing month over month at a significant clip right now in the middle of a bear market where most projects in general, like outside of music, just in general and NFTs, are dealing with attrition, right? They're dealing with their holder counts going down month over month, their floor prices going down. We seem to like steady a little bit, but by and large, a lot of businesses are questioning their models. Like, is this going to continue to work? Music has not had that problem. There's actually been, and I'll keep pointing to Sound XYZ because I think it's really like the epicenter of music NFTs right now. The growth in amount of artists onboarded and the amount of holders onboarded every month is pretty astounding. And what we've seen is that the mint prices have gone down to something that's more reasonable. So instead of it being 0.1, which would be, call it $120 right now, it's 0.01. And so it's like $12 or $25 or whatever. That's much more palatable for getting a mainstream audience on board, collecting more and more NFTs. And so I think we're finding, it's experimenting and iterating. And that's not across everyone. Some people have higher price points because they earned it and they have more notoriety. But I agree with you, to go back to your question, that a lot of the massive sales that we saw in 2021 were not sustainable, and we've seen the air in that balloon go away. But what we are seeing in its place is a vibrant community of collectors and artists that are building in the space and have an eye on the future on where this goes.
I want to build off what you're saying. I'm also curious to go back to your points around why collectors would buy NFTs, but let's just build off of Sound XYZ, because I do think that is such an interesting use case. And you put out a great thread recently about why they're having such great success. And you had what you called the 3 C's: community, context, and clout. And we talk so much about community on this show. And it was also interesting. I noticed that your title, I think at Venice Music, you said was Web3 and community. So there's such a natural tie in there, which I just love. Can you touch on what has led to Sound XYZ's success?
So breaking each of those down, the context, the content, community, start with community. It's a buzzword that I'm sure a lot of people roll their eyes at when they hear, because often what is billed as a community is really just an investment club. It's just a bunch of speculators tied together, hoping that price goes up. And when it doesn't, they leave. I've seen it. I've been a part of a bunch of PFP projects where the bear started and it was like, it's a lot quieter in here. Like, there's a community that you talked about isn't as strong. You don't get that with music. And what's been really interesting is a lot of artists, in the nature of like sound, for people that don't know, you're typically dropping releases in the same cadence that you would for streaming. So if you're dropping a track for streaming services, call it once a month, probably on Sound once a month. And so there's kind of like this feedback loop that you get to create with your community. You're able to reward them if they bought in previously, they get pre-sale access for a discount, but you have the constant content feed for them, which is great in a space of being in the attention economy. What's interesting is it's a jumping off point where usually the cycle that I see, or the process that I see, is someone releases on Sound XYZ. They use that as a jumping off point to create usually like a Telegram group now instead of a Discord of all of their collectors. And so already that is like a very different proposition than what Web2 music looks like, right? Because maybe you have a fan club, but if you have a Lady Gaga fan club. Is Lady Gaga in it? No, she's not in it. And it's like a very different, it's more of just like, oh, I'm a fan of you. And you think of people that love Bieber, One Direction, or Ariana or whatever. It's just an expression of their fandom. This is not that. This is an artist sitting with their collectors on a level playing field and just discussing music and getting feedback on the things that they want to release. And it's a constant dialogue, and it's almost never driven by financial speculation. It's honestly, of all the communities, the music ones are the ones I spend the most time in, because it's just people that are all tied together by their love of music and not speculation. Most of us are buying these planning to vault them for a while anyways. And so it really is just about, do I have a sense of belonging here? Do I feel like these people have the same set of values that I do? And that is what keeps people going. So it's really strong. I'm in a collectors group with most of the like Sound XYZ top collectors. There's a bunch of different artists that have their own Telegram groups I'm a part of. And I come back every day because it's always something fresh and people that you get to know, and becomes like bringing face to the faceless. You actually get to know the stories behind the artist, which take me into my second point, which is context, which is something that we have lost in streaming. And I don't think people are really aware of it. But if you go back a decade, like mid 2000s, and I brought up the story earlier of going home and running to read the blogs. And I remember where I was when I read about Section 80 and Kendrick Lamar. I remember where I was when I downloaded Comeback Season in 10th grade in history class and showed Drake to my friends. Like, I know the stories around these artists and the moments and what it meant and what it felt like. And we've lost it completely in streaming, and it's taken some life out of music for a lot of people. The benefit is you get all the music. The downside is you get all the music. Like, you don't actually know anything behind it. And so why sound has really succeeded, I can give like a direct example. So Daniel Allen, I brought up earlier, he released his first EP on Sound, Overstimulated. I think it was around last February. It was the first one that they did on Sound where you had to have a listening party, which is everyone listened to the actual EP together at the same time before you can mint. This is like one of the most profound experiences that I've had in Web3. So leading up to most mints, they do like a Twitter space. Daniel jumped on, explained what the album meant to him. You go to the detail page. It's filled with artist notes about all the different songs and who he is. And like, it was bringing that context back to the music. And then the moment of listening to the EP with a bunch of collectors at the same time, something that I will always cherish. And that context continues to stay until this day. And then the last piece,
I just got to jump in there quick, Austin. It just, the one problem I see right there is how many times are you, like, I think about my fiance or like my good friends, and we're listening to their music and they're like, oh, this is one of my favorite songs. And I'm like, oh, what song is this? And they're like, I have no idea. It's just on a playlist that I love. But I couldn't tell you what the name is. I couldn't tell you who the artist is. Like, that is exactly what you're saying. We have totally lost that. Whereas back in the day, you really loved the artists that you followed and you were excited for their new releases and you were ready for them. Whereas now it's just like being in front of a fire hose. And it's great in some ways because, wow, like the discovery of new music is off the charts. I discover more new artists than I can handle, but I don't have that connection anymore unless I go to the shows, unless it's like a live show. That's the only time when I feel like I get that connection. I think you're right. It's a problem.
Maybe it's not a problem for everyone.
I was just going to say, is that a problem, or is that just the way that the world is going and we just want to listen to music, and it's less about, and this sucks for art, like musicians. I'm just trying to be on the other side here and say, is that really a problem? If you just like to listen to music and you're more worried about and focused on something else rather than trying to figure out like who this person is that sung it and what the name of the song is. We live in a world where you don't need to know that anymore. You used to need to, because that was the only way you could find it. Now you don't necessarily need it, I don't know if that's a good thing or not, but
I agree with you. I would say if our choice was taken away, the way that distribution evolved is that our choice was taken away. When you're having a fire hose of music put in front of you, you don't have any choice but to just take it in passively. I have had my entire music habits changed. I was a crate digger. I was someone that wanted to find something new before everyone else. Now I just throw on Pollen on Spotify or like my New Music Friday or Discover Weekly and know that the algorithm understands me. I'm going to enjoy the music. And that is good for a lot of people. And even for me, for most of my listening, my traditional music listening is on Spotify.
Right.
But it has opened an alternative path, and it's one that can live in coexistence. Like, I don't think this kills streaming. I think that's where a lot of people get what Web3 music is about wrong. This I see as an added layer. It allows for artists to have new experience with their collectors and fans, provide more value to their music. But I don't think like we eradicate streaming by any means. And so it's really just about optionality and what you prefer. At least have the option.
Okay, tell us.
Yeah, there's the
Go
third
ahead.
one, I think.
Yeah, as I say, tell us about
Cloud.
Yeah.
So this is one
but I do have a question I want to come back to after, but tell us about Cloud first.
So Cloud is one that I don't think a lot of people are honest with themselves about how status driven just society is in general. It's no more true than on the internet. You think about the curated profiles that people put on IG, like showing the fancy cars that they have and the things that they own and the places that they go. They're not doing that for their own benefit. If they were just doing it because they enjoyed it, they wouldn't share it. They're sharing it because status and clout is important to them. I think similarly, what you're seeing in the Web3 world is, my friend Degentraland calls it, it's an actual term, conspicuous consumption. You have people that are rocking Bored Ape PFPs and things like that to flaunt it, to stunt. And what Sound got really right from the start was elevating the collector profile, was actually putting it on display. Who were the big dogs in the space? How were people trending? What did they own? What were their grails? Really like giving them a platform it would be one thing to own all these NFTs, but to actually like show what I'm about and things and be able to climb a leaderboard so I can see trailing 7 days, 30 days, all time, compare myself to other people, gamify it in a bit. As like I found myself, and I like to think that I'm a fairly reserved minter, but I'll be like, damn, I just woke up and I saw that I went down one place on the leaderboard. Like, I gotta get back in there and find a mint that I'm excited about. And so, yeah, and you've had people that have built entire careers off it. Like again, Cooper Turley, the biggest music NFT collector, he built an entire fund around the premise that like this dude spends more time in music NFT Web3 world than anyone else, and he can verifiably prove it through his wallet. So I think it's amazing. Like I don't know of any other career that you could do something like that.
That's why Spotify Unwrapped is such a big deal, right? Everyone is like, oh, I want to show off how much music I listen to, what genres, what artists. So it's like people do want to brag about who they listen to, and especially if they're someone that was new that then became big. If you can prove that you listened to them before they became big, I feel like that's so much clout. You know what I mean? I remember when I was on SoundCloud years and years ago, I think I was in college maybe, and I was listening to Chami's, like a DJ, and I loved him, but he was really small at the time. And I was like, oh, this guy's going big. I pushed it out to all my friends. I was like, yo, you guys got to hear this guy. He's going to be amazing. And then he became really big. Like years later, I was like, shit, I wish I could have capitalized on that somehow. Like I was there early, and I helped him grow. And so that was one of the, when music NFTs came along, I was like, oh, I can see that. Because I had that moment. And I was like, I wish I could have owned something or proved something instead of a screenshot from my phone from a conversation years ago. So there's definitely
exactly
music, no doubt.
Actually being able to own and verifiably prove that you were there early and be able to see value from that.
See some upside. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Jay, I know you have a question, but I just want to ask one thing, just to set some context. For those that have not been in this space or have used Sound yet or played around with music NFTs, can you give us just some context? Like, who are the artists that are making these right now? And who are the people that are actually in there minting? Is this like a very young demographic? Is it Web3 natives only? Or is it bringing in new people? Just give me a little bit of a background of who are the people that are all in this at the moment.
Yeah, sure. So it's definitely evolved. I would say at the beginning when music NFTs were just starting to become a thing, the Blows and RACs of the world, it was very like electronic focused. It was artists that had some sort of technical computer background where it just like intrinsically made sense. Blau released a token gated music festival years ago, which is still to this day wild to me, like how far ahead of the curve he was with that. And now you're seeing artists from all different genres, from all different levels of technical expertise. I mean, there are so many like no code solutions for minting, and it's made it very easy where I collect across a wide spectrum. I would say It's still fairly Western focused. US is still the number one demo. That's just broad, like across Web3 in a lot of respects,
Right.
particularly culturally and NFTs. I think we're just kind of a little bit further ahead with this stuff, and people are starting to catch up. And then on the collector side, it's growing. So like Sound, I believe just crossed 6,000 unique holders, which for perspective is roughly the size of a unique holder count in a 10,000 PFP project
Mhm.
in one single
Mhm.
one. If you were to look at the total volume done on Sound, it's something like a top 600 project on OpenSea. So it's very, very nascent. It's growing at an exponential pace, but it is very nascent. We have definitely moved on a collector side from a few people that got it and were kind of like king making and controlling the market and trying to make this a thing to more and more newcomers coming on board. And the mint sizes and prices, I think, are reflective of that.
Okay, I'm going to jump in. I guess I have two directions I want to take us in here. One is you mentioned that the way you see this is sort of like a future model. So streaming's not going to go anywhere. We're still going to have streaming, but what we're going to do is, it sounds like, but I'd like to hear your sort of, if you have a playbook or a framework that you're thinking about this for artists, is it sounds like what you think is artists might start by launching an NFT of their music, offer it to their super fans to bring together a smaller community of super fans, which allows a sort of a different level of access, and then maybe release it on streaming like a month later. How do you think this plays out long term? How will all of this work, and what's the model that you think artists will use?
Yeah, I don't know that it needs to be delayed in terms of a release strategy like Web3 first and then
Okay.
streaming. What I see is more of just adding another vertical. So if you have your Web2 verticals across your Web2 release strategy, your radio, your marketing, this is like another tool in the toolkit. In the same way that like you'll go and release those songs to streaming, you'll mint them as NFTs for collectors. And whether that has additional utility or not, I'm not convinced that most NFTs right now need to. I think it's fine just to have an audio file and an album cover art and collect around that. And really, the utility you're giving is one, the ability to collect that as a trading card, potential upside as they grow. And two, maybe it's access into a Telegram group with the artist. But keeping that as simple as possible, I think a lot of artists try to make it complicated, and we're just not there yet. In the future, maybe you stratify a bunch of different access to things based on NFTs that are owned. I see NFTs in like tech going way more broad. Like I'm personally very bullish on ticketing NFTs within music. I think that's where we're going to see the first mainstream adoption because it just makes too much sense for everyone. The fact that Ticketmaster hasn't done it yet, and I know that they're working on it because it makes sense for them, right? Like, why would they get cut out of the secondary market when they could create a token and make sure that they have a perpetual royalty? So that's something where I have my eyes on more than any other place for mainstream adoption because it makes sense on both sides of the marketplace. But as it relates to music NFTs, yeah, I think we'll see artists experimenting with a wide variety of NFT types. So whether it's one of one, paid editions, free NFTs, I think the word NFT will go away. We'll be calling these collectibles. The need to actually interact with crypto will become more and more obfuscated, and they'll just be things that you hold like anything else on your phone. That's the vision that I have.
I also kind of just see NFTs, and I'm just starting to wrap my head around this, is it's a new file type on the internet, right? We talk about PDF, JPEG, MP3, MP4, and NFT. It's just a different file type that is now trackable and programmable, which you can't do with an MP3, you can't do with a JPEG or with a PDF. And so it's kind of like if you think of Lens Protocol, for example, we're all posting content on there. Just the file type is not, I don't know what, like a JPEG uploaded into Facebook. It's now a JPEG with an NFT wrapped around it. Why? Because people can collect it. I can see who's actually interacting with my stuff on chain and verify that. There's no cost associated with it. There's no business model there. It's just a better file for the internet to track things and to make those things be interoperable with other applications rather than just the one that I put it on, right? And I think there's tons of use cases with that for music. If we just wrap music in NFTs always, even if we think business model aside, there's just the interoperability aspect of having music be able to be used cross-platform and in different areas rather than just on Spotify. And I can't do anything with it when it's on Spotify. It's just like it's stuck there. I can put it in a playlist on Spotify, but that's it, right? So I don't know if that makes it more discoverable or what it does, or it makes it more utility. I'm not sure. But I think that idea is going to blossom with music as well, along with this whole business models around it and maybe sharing revenue streams and sharing royalties or however that ends up. I am curious right now, what is the playbook? So there's all these people that are minting NFTs for their music currently. Are they doing it where it's just like one-ofs, or are they doing 100 of them for some reason? Is it unlimited? Is there a playbook yet, or it's still so new that we have no idea?
The playbook is experimentation for sure.
Yeah,
I would say that there are a variety of ways that you can go as an artist. I personally would recommend always sell less than you think you can for less than you think they're worth. So, if you think you can sell 50, sell 20. If you think that they're worth 0.1, sell them for 0.05.
I like that advice.
The point is to create a healthy ecosystem and make it worthwhile for your collectors as well. And you also don't want to get so much juice at the beginning that you can't subsequently follow it up. Before anyone mints, I think the first thing that they need to do is just participate. Go support other artists. Go mint their stuff. Join their communities. Get in their Telegrams. See how they're communicating with one another. Get to know the collectors. I mean, you could literally go through the top 100 collectors on Sound and get to know them pretty quickly. Go follow them on Twitter. Understand what their preferences are. And a lot of people don't realize, particularly early on, they see the success and the massive ETH sales of a lot of these artists. It's not the same game as Web 2. It's not a megaphone of trying to reach as many people as possible. It is a grassroots campaign. It's more like a presidential campaign of going door to door, city council, even going door to door. Get your vote. That's what it's like getting in front of collectors and just building personal relationships with them, because it is the promise of 100 true fans. The promise of Web3 is that you don't need scale. And that should be really exciting for a lot of artists who have been pigeonholed into having to create what is going to pop, what's going to be viral, what's going to be mainstream. And that's like, no, you have full creative freedom. Make what you want, and know that in this massive world of billions of people, you can find 100 true fans that are willing to pay for your work. The work is just on you to go and find them. So that's the playbook more than anything, is just participate, get involved. Don't come out the gates firing with a mint. Like, just go and learn and feel out the ecosystem and meet people and ask questions. Don't be afraid of being the stupidest person in the room. That's how you're going to learn.
Here's what I could see as being a playbook. It sounds like the issue previously into building a music career was you needed funding, right? And you needed distribution. And so the record labels used to do that for you. They would help you get started. Probably, I don't know what all the funding was for, but let's say equipment and maybe travel and getting into events and all that kind of stuff. Distribution is no longer as big of a problem because you can just start putting your music on SoundCloud and Spotify, and now the whole world can see it. The problem is that most of that money's still going to the record labels. Instead, if I am a new artist and I'm minting these music NFTs and I'm starting to build a community, can I almost form, I don't know if it necessarily has to be a DAO, but let's say these community members are basically funding me to get started, right? If I can sell a bunch of these music NFTs in the beginning of my career to make X amount, 20K, 30K, whatever it is, maybe even more, these are people who are almost like mini VCs who believe in this person early. I'm going to give a couple $100 to them. And if I can get a few hundred people to do that, I'm going to make a decent amount of money. Now I've been funded basically. And once that works, now I can go and put my stuff on Spotify or wherever, and the record labels are no longer taking 80% of that. Could that be a model, or am I missing something here?
No. And artists have done that. So we talked about Daniel Allen's Overstimulated project, the EP that I bought on Sound.
Yeah.
That was a mirror raise before it was an EP. He actually did was exactly what you just said. It was, I'm going to sell a portion of my royalties. I'm going to do this mirror crowd fund. And so people bought NFTs that then got them an allocation of tokens that represented their share in the DAO. And so a percent of royalties went back into the DAO, a percent of royalties went to Daniel. He used that to fund his project and to ship it out. And so, yeah, we're seeing that in a multitude of ways, whether it's to raise for a specific project, whether it is creating, like, there's a lot of collectives that are being developed right now. Like Loners is a great example by Rio Cragen, where they're dropping collaborative, call it like individual music NFT drops, a percentage of royalties go back into a treasury. They're using that to fund recording a bunch of EPs out in LA together and being able to get all the equipment and everyone together. So yeah, one of the biggest areas that labels have historically had control is their piggy bank. Like as an artist, as a struggling artist, you needed access to capital and you couldn't take out a traditional loan. You can't go really anywhere else to get that money. Now you absolutely can go and pitch collectors and try to crowdsource funds. Yeah, your fans. What you want to be careful of is I've never liked the idea of artists being like effectively like stocks, and it can very much move in that way if you start having like you mentioned VCs. I don't really want to see myself as like an LP. That will change the relationship, just like it does change the relationship between a label and an artist of what your expectations are and how you feel about the music. Like it's a delicate balance for sure.
It's anyone's guess where this goes. There's the funding side of things that Web3 can enable. There's the better experiences for your fans it can enable, maybe more discoverability. It's like the whole spectrum. It's doing things.
So I'm curious, you were just at Art Basel recently in early December. What was the vibe like there? And maybe what was one takeaway or one conversation that you had that really got you excited about the future?
Yeah, it was much more subdued than last year. Last year was like in the height of the bull. And so it was in a practical sense, like there was less organic foot traffic, although getting across Miami and Basel is always a nightmare. Just take my word for it. But there was one event put on by Karma Wave and his partner Violetta. Incredible. Like it was invite only for their holders. Basically, they put on like a set with a couple of other artists that are experimenting in Web3. And it was a lot of people that I had been able to support throughout the year and see them in person for the first time and get to really engage with them and see how they're building. And it was less of one conversation and more of the vibe of having all of those incredible artists and collectors in one room and it just being like this energy of support for one another. And I think we weeded out a lot of tourists over the last several months, and the people that are here now are certainly building for the long run, and it's given people a lot more creative freedom. I'm seeing people try new things. I'm not sure when this is coming out, but literally as we speak, Daniel, who I've brought up a couple of times, and Rio are putting out a joint project for 2,500 music NFTs. It'll be the biggest release on Sound XYZ by more than double in a full-on bear market. Like that's the type of stuff that people are really swinging for the fences for because they're seeing the growth, they're seeing the validation. And that to me makes me really excited because when everything should be indicating that this is going to be dead, all I'm seeing is positive indicators.
That's so great to hear. I love the optimism through it all. Is we got to support each other and keep each other up. That's great. That's so awesome. So let's just step back. Okay. Pull out our looking glass and look into the future. Maybe it's only a year, maybe it's 5 years. We all know how fast this space moves. Any predictions you have or anything that you're looking down the road at and you're like, oh yeah, this is where I see this going, whether it be things in the metaverse, whether it be virtual concerts. We didn't even really talk about virtual concerts, but I think that's a whole big topic to touch on, whether it be focusing on the collectors or on the musicians.
Yeah, I think in general, digital spaces and wearables, I think people are not bullish enough on it. It's going to come faster than we think. I think it's still like a bridge too far for some people to think through like, oh, I would actually value things digitally more than I would in the physical world, because ultimately it goes back to this idea of like clout and presence. Why have something in your closet that no one can see when you're spending more and more time digitally every day in front of these people? Like that's going to be where the perceived value is. And so for artists, virtual concerts are interesting. I don't think we're there yet. I'm more fascinated in like mixed reality, like augmented experiences. It'll be really cool when we get to a place where you're at a concert in real life and there are things augmented in the space for you to interact with, whether it adds to your experience there in the moment or it's okay, RSVP for an after party that's like in a digital space with everyone. The one thing that I'm really fascinated by is just like the melding of the physical and digital world, less of just seeing them get more and more intrinsically tied to one another. And so, yeah, as an artist, I think figuring out how you play in that space, how you continue to bring digital things into your physical world and vice versa. I'm seeing a lot of artists right now experimenting with like proof of participation NFTs at their events. And so you can imagine you go, you scan a QR code, you get a little collectible. That's a very easy way for this artist to be able to identify you and be able to reward you in the future. So maybe it's people that went to a certain amount of concerts, get exclusive pre-sale access, or they get airdropped something or whatever. They have a direct line of communication in a way that they didn't previously, because in the ticketing industry, Live Nation owns all that data. So those type of experiences is definitely what I'm interested in seeing how they continue to develop. It just seems like there's a lot of value there.
For sure. Now, I want to give a quick shill for Austin for your stuff, because I got to say, you're the first guest we've ever had come on the show who, when I asked you what you wanted to shill today, you said nothing. So mad respect, man. You're like, I just want to hang out and chat. I don't want to give a show. So I'm going to show for you. Austin has an incredible podcast, One Big Idea. If you guys aren't listening to it, you should go check it out. And he's got a great newsletter as well. And he's really thrown out so much great content on Twitter. So all of you listeners, if you aren't following or subscribed, go check out Austin. He's got so much great stuff that he's producing. Austin, anything that I missed?
Well, actually, starting tomorrow, we're launching in partnership with Sound XYZ a weekly radio show. So I'm going to be playing some of like the best music that I've been listening to over the past week. We'll bring on different artists to interview them, and like think kind of like Zane Lowe or like Travis Mills type of vibe for like an hour. So that'll be, starting on Fridays, I believe at 2 p.m. Eastern time, 11 a.m. Pacific. So I'll have it posted on my Twitter if people want to follow me there.
Nice. I'm excited.
That's awesome. That's sweet. Can't wait. Okay, I think that one of the hardest things I find is just the discoverability of NFT music right now. Is like, I tried to find, I think you and I were chatting in a Telegram group, because I was asking if anybody is using a music NFT for their intro music for their podcast. And you were like, yeah, I'm using one. And I was like, how the heck did you find it? I mean, you can go to Sound XYZ, but we don't have that discoverability yet. I was so stoked to see that Winamp is now integrating. I don't even use Winamp, and I was stoked to see that there's a music app that is integrating NFTs into their platform.
Oh, that's cool. I didn't know that.
We need that ability. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Typically we ask, what's an NFT you'll never sell, but what's a music NFT you'll never sell?
Oh, there's Rio Cragen's Feel is one of my favorite tracks he's ever put out, and he's become a really close friend. So that one's vaulted for sure.
Nice.
Dope. Okay. Favorite person to follow on Twitter?
Gabby Goldberg. I find her takes very insightful. She doesn't write a lot, but when she does, like, I drop everything that I'm doing and pay attention. She's a bright light in the space. So big fan.
I just DM'd her like 2 days ago. So
yeah. Literally just got connected to her at like a music conference in New York, and then we had a one-on-one a week ago. She's an incredible human being and so smart.
Yeah, we want to get her on the podcast because she's got, when she does tweet, she's got some amazing stuff.
It's always good. Yeah, she's very much quality over quantity.
Yeah, definitely.
Favorite Web3 tool? And that might not be necessarily your tool. Maybe it's a tool for collectors. Maybe it's a tool for artists.
Is MetaMask like a cop-out? I assume people say that a lot. Like,
No one says MetaMask.
Really?
Yeah.
I mean, it's a tool that you use more than anything. Like, I can't think of. It's an amazing tool. The fact that you have a browser wallet is, it allows you access to the entire world of dApps. So yeah, MetaMask is number one for me.
Nice.
Should be doing no paid promos. So MetaMask, if you want to pay me, hit me up.
Okay, final question. If you had a billboard that 1 billion people were going to see, what would you write on it?
This is going to be cliche, but just be kind to one another.
Love it.
Like, that would be it. There's a lot of negativity in the space right now, and people are just like going through a lot, and you never know what anyone's dealing with. So just, be nice, be kind to one another.
You'd be amazed how many guests say something in that vein. Most guests have something just spread love yourself, be kind. We don't share that inspiration and that wisdom enough. It feels, I don't know why it feels cliche. It's the whole purpose of humanity. We're in this together, right?
Yeah, amen to that.
Austin, this has been awesome, man. Thanks for the time. Really appreciate it. Thanks for your wisdom. Thanks for your insight. I can't wait to check out your collection, your vault on Sound XYZ.
Check it out. Yeah, I'm up there.
Thanks, Austin.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you for listening to Web3 Academy. We hope this helps you along your Web3 journey. And if it does, please share this episode and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Nothing in this podcast was financial advice. Crypto and Web3 can be risky. You can literally lose it all. In fact, if you invest on account of what we say, you probably will lose it all. So don't do that. In all honesty, the point of this podcast is to remove the noise of markets and price and focus on utility and implementation anyway. So you should not take any of this as financial advice. Thank you, friends, and see you in the next one.